Much of this upcoming introduction comes from the program for the 2002 Three Poets for Peace event, and it was written by Chris Brandt. In 2002, this country began a war against the Taliban in Afghanistan. 18 years later, that war continues. Before it started, there was a moment in which many U.S. citizens debated whether war was the only solution to the Saudi terrorist attack on 9/11/2001.
There was a brief period of about 2 weeks in which a national dialogue was possible. In New York City's Union Square, people debated the possible responses to the attack. Had this been a true democracy, the people's voices would have had more weight than those of the corporations, the military, the politicians. But on October 7th, as the second mass New York demonstration for peace was to start, the massive U.S. bombing campaign was announced from the podium.
3 New York poets, Veronica Golos, Angelo Verga, and myself, Chris Brandt, decided that we could not stand by and bemoan U.S. policies. Since we are poets, we had to do something. We organized a reading where we and other poets expressed our opposition to war's destruction of life and our effort to create understanding of life in language.
The U.S. war in Afghanistan continues, and now we are in the grip of a global pandemic that knows nothing of nationalistic rhetoric. Have we, our government, our social leaders, our poets, learned anything from these experiences?
For this recording, we are practicing social distance. We are Zooming this barcrawlradio poetry, what is it good for, episode with 3 poets for peace. I am Rebecca McCain, and I am joined by my BCR co-host, Alan Winson and Chris Brandt. And here we go!
And so here we go!
And so here we go!
My name is Chris Brandt. I'm co-producer with Alan Winson of this series of poetry podcasts. Poetry, what's it good for? And today we have 2 of my treasured colleagues from back at the beginning of the century. In 2002, at the end of 2001, we got together and dubbed ourselves 3 Poets for Peace and did a series of readings of poetry, in which all the proceeds that came in from those readings went to solidarity groups and so forth. We did readings in New York City and in several places in Massachusetts. And these 2 people are among my favorites on the face of the planet. And I'm so glad that we're all here today in isolation.
Yeah. How do you know each other? How did you first meet?
Geez.
Well, Angelo, was it through you, Angelo?
Probably.
I was panhandling on the corner of and DC Street.
Right.
Reading poetry for 5 cents.
Yeah, and these guys wouldn't give me any money, so I followed them. And,
Angelo, your nose is getting longer.
He's that. Yeah, you seem like the kind.
It was probably because Angelo...
And that's weird, isn't it?
He was the curator at
Cornelia Street.
Cornelia Street Cafe. Is that where we all met, or was it something Chris did?
I may, maybe. I'm not sure.
It could have been that. It could have been at the 14th Street Y. Who knows?
Yeah.
I was curating at the 14th.
Yeah.
Could have been through you at the 14th.
I think so.
On the east side.
You know, one of the problems that I've had in putting this together is that you 2 or 3 have so much history going back before the beginning of the century that, it's hard to say because you are 3 significant poets. I know, Angelo, you were the poet laureate of Cornelia Street at one time, and you had that cafe that you ran. And I urge people to go and look up Angelo Verga. And Veronica Golos is well published, lots and lots of books. I don't books about poetry. Let me see if we can get to know you this way. Why? This is like an impossible to answer, but go ahead. Why did you become a poet?
How serious an answer do you want?
Oh, I want a serious answer.
I don't think I had any choice. And I always tell students, if you have a choice of being a writer or a poet and not being a writer or a poet, you should definitely not. Because the only reason to be a poet in particular is you have no choice. There's something about language and struggling with words that is essential for who you are and how you see the world. It's necessity. It has to be a necessity. If it's an option, exercise the option to do something else, because you'll probably have more fun. You'll certainly make more money. The only thing is you won't meet people like Chris and Veronica.
Yes.
Why?
Or Angelo.
But you did.
No,
if you're not, okay.
Or if you have a podcast, you can meet them too. So
this was a calling for you.
So Veronica, when you were shaking your head, yes, agreeing with Angelo, when was the first time you realized this is something I've got to do? I have to put words together.
Well, I think as a child, I saw the world differently than most people I came across. I have a poem in my new book about it, about sort of feeling like I'm always tipped over and sort of looking at it differently. And I think also that it's everything Angelo said, and it's a particular, for me, it's like I translate. I translate and experience what I'm seeing, what people are talking about, into a poem. It's like a translation, so that, and also it's how I know what I'm thinking.
Exactly.
Very much so. I start out, I think, I'm going to write this poem about A, B, or C and everything, and give me a prompt, and then I go, and it can turn out to be very, very different. I think it's what Angela said, it's the music. It's really growing up in a particular time that I grew up, where the music was both socially conscious and beautiful, and primarily for me, African-American music. And also I was a dancer. So all of these things sort of get translated into poetry for me.
So
Do you have a time limit? I don't want to.
No. It's talk as much as you want. I have a thing called editing. So
how do we?
Yeah, right. I mean, you read poetry is not only the inspiration, but it's the going back and reworking. I'm sure. I mean, when we were talking to Martina Spada, and he was talking about reworking one stanza for a month or more. Remember that, Chris?
Yeah. Well, I've got a slightly different story from my two colleagues here. I kind of didn't have a choice, because my dad was a writer and my mom was a painter. And so I grew up with art all over the place. But poetry really for me came the day I stole one of my dad's poems and handed it in as my assignment in junior high school. And everyone loved it. And I thought, wow, if I can do this.
Or just keep dad doing it.
So it inspired you.
Well, I figured I better learn to do it myself.
You speak Spanish, German, and English.
Little French, little Italian. Yeah.
Yes, and so in a different way you translate, right?
The poetry is translation.
Well, that's
Robert Frost said that poetry is what's lost in translation, but I think just as much it's what's found in translation.
Right.
I'm going to ask this, and maybe there's no answer to this. Can you remember the first time when you sat down and said, "I'm writing a poem"? This is a poem. I'm not just doing a diary. This is a poem.
Wow.
Yesterday.
No, you've written poems before yesterday.
The first time.
Every time's the first time. But I mean, I was a little kid and I wanted to. Oh man, this is so embarrassing. Uh, on TV, there was this show about God, the guy with the coonskin hat and
Davy
Oh,
Crockett.
Davy Crockett.
Crockett,
Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett.
King of the Wild
Frontier, right. We're all of the same age.
on up and up. You see the greenest state in the land of the free. Anyway, break. I was a kid. I decided that I was going to tell a better version of the story than the one I was watching on TV.
And you did it in poetry.
I did, yes.
See, that's what I wanted to ask before. I didn't get a chance to. See, you said that, not Angelo, Veronica, you said that you felt like you were translating. So translating is usually from one language to another. So you're translating from what language? I mean, the poem, I assume, is in English.
Experience, at least when I started, it was like translation from an experience, or, you know, I was in the political movement for 40 years. So sometimes I'd be listening to a speech and in my head, I would be translating it into poetry. Do you know what I mean? Whatever I felt was poetry. It was how I could take it in.
So experience
and give
into
it back, right? And give it back.
Was it a sense of trying to let people understand what this is
Within you, I guess.
from your perspective? Maybe
it was just in my head and on the page how I reformed what I had just either heard or experienced or something.
right.
I guess feeling always that I think all three of us that we were kind of outside the realm, you know. Both, you know, I know the three of us, and Angelo and I share a working class background, and you know, and so when you start on poetry, on the one hand, you are looked at as separate then from your class, and then but because you're from that class in the poetry world, a lot of times you're separate. So there were a lot of and politically, you know, I mean, at the time the country was there were many people like against the war and that, so you weren't so isolated. But in a lot of, I know my thinking, there weren't that many people that thought that way. So, and also a difficult childhood. So translating that, making that into something else, translating it into poems, which I finally did last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, yes.
Yes.
So we started off this BCR episode referring to the Poets for Peace event, the Poets for Peace event, first held on January 25th, 2002, following the start of the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Why did you organize that event? What were you thinking? What did you want to accomplish?
We had to do something.
Was that at 11.99? Are we talking about, or
That was the first one was 11.99. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the January 25th was a second one.
No,
Just-
that was it.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't we do something at PS 11?
Yes.
That's where you're
yeah,
talking.
somewhere in the village. Yeah, we did one there later. I think that was in March.
And this was in protest of the decision by the Bush administration to go to war in Afghanistan and then in Iraq.
Yeah.
And what did you think you were going to accomplish by reading poetry?
There, at the time that these wars started, they were incredibly popular.
Yeah.
Meaning they polled like 90% approval or something, or maybe more. And this was based on lies, for the most part, and
Yep.
also based on controlling the information that people had access to. So what we thought we could do was create a poll where people could find alternative feelings and information and emotions that would allow them to break out of being trapped in war hysteria. And I think even more grandiosely than that, we thought that we could actually affect the ability of the government to conduct their propaganda war and the actual war.
What were your audiences like? How did they respond?
Oh, the one at 11.99 was fabulous. But we had a great lineup there.
It was Bread and Roses, which was helped organized by my then wife, who was working at 11.99. Yeah, it was huge. It was hundreds of people who showed up.
Is 11.99 a public school or a
Union.
union? Okay, it's a union.
Union Hall.
Right. Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Bread and Roses Theater, I believe it's called, right? It's on 42nd,
43rd Street. It's in the Martin Luther King annex to 11.99.
Okay.
So Veronica, what was your reason for doing it? Why did you same reason? You thought this would make a difference, did it?
Well, all of us at one point or another, but especially me, because I was in an organization, we were fighting the war. I mean, we were demonstrating against the war. And in fact, I was working at the time as a secretary, administrative assistant at Columbia Presbyterian, and I actually quit my job because I really felt there was, I think all of us, we're the children of the Vietnam War. And so much that we learned and suffered, and the feeling towards the Vietnamese, I know for myself, was overwhelming. I had taken a trip to Cuba, and they had a whole group of Vietnamese there. They had a big sign up, as in Vietnam, as in Cuba, Vietnam, or something like that, real solidarity. And two women walked towards me. I was digging, making Los Naranjos, a little town. And I just burst into tears. I mean, there was no way to say, So this war came, and then I wrote a book called Vocabulary Silence. And it was out of that experience and others. I think the thing about poetry, like music, it gets beneath the rib. We're all able to make speeches and all of that. I think the three of us had to do that. But there's something about poetry that even if somebody's sort of resisting the music of it, it gets beneath the rib, and it's I think a very well, first of all, it's always been done, from in Western life, in the Arab world, certainly. I mean, it's always been done during the various wars, whoever was warring against each other. But I think it gets beneath the rib, and it's along with your actual actions is a great component.
Would you all read one of your poems that featured the themes of the Poets for Peace events? Would you do that for us?
I have here.
It's a manifesto.
Actually, yeah, it is a manifesto.
There it is. Okay.
Actual publication that, can you see that? 3 poets for peace, against the tide.
Against the tide.
And then our names. And the back says when this book came out, which was March of 2003.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And all 3 of you are represented in that book.
Correct. And
Yes.
all 3 of us made little statements about what we thought we were doing.
Can you read some of those?
I can read them, all 3 of them, if you like.
Okay.
I read Chris's to Chris the other day, and he was amazed at how smart he used to be.
Yeah, that's true. I couldn't believe I'd actually written that.
Under the heading of statement of conscience, statement of purpose. That sounds like you, Veronica. That sounds.
I don't know.
That's what it sounds like you. Anyway, there are three of them, and the first one is Chris. If truth is the first casualty of war, the second is language. When we abuse language by proclaiming bombs smart and war just, we hack away at trust and at the human connections among us, like the real World Wide Web. If we would claim the language we love for thought rather than plot, for mindful action, not violent reaction, we cannot limit our vision to the pleasures and problems of poetry. When the American Council of Trustees and Alumni labeled the slogan, "Our grief is not a cry for war,"
Yeah.
morally relative, and even implied that it was seditious. And when we are told by our Attorney General that we are either on the side of US policy or support evildoers, then we must stand up and say a resounding no in every way that we can. And these poems are one way. That's Chris's statement.
Beautiful, Chris, as always. Really.
Now you
Thank you.
Yours, Veronica. I want poetry to be for the physical world, because every day in my name, bombs, bullets, weapons of mass destruction obliterate what poetry reveals. That beneath the wonder of our differences, the fabric in which we are wrapped, the culture in which we speak, we all share, illuminate, and are haunted by the same human condition. Those who maim, wound, destroy one of us do it to all of us. I want poetry to stand as witness, refuse to leave the field, open its arms and cry out, "We are one." I want poetry to fight back. That ain't bad.
That's damn good.
I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah, we had a good time. We did.
We did.
Go ahead, Angela. Read
It's
yours.
the shortest. It's me. It says, poetry is often taken to be a mere collection of beautiful words designed to make smart people feel smarter and provide yet more comfort for the already comfortable. From that point of view, these aren't poems at all. They are anti. So in addition to being anti-war, I guess I'm anti-poetic as well. As for philosophy, two brief quotes come to mind. Rage against the machine, and if a fool but persists in his folly, he would be wise.
So you really.
I feel like
really.
I feel like this is testimony for that period of time.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely.
That's pretty cool, right?
Very
Yeah.
cool. Very cool.
Is there a need for such statements now?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You know, while we're doing all of this and the whole world is feeling this virus and everything, you know, U.S. troops are still occupying Iraq, Afghanistan. They're going
Syria.
into Sudan. I mean, you know,
We have troops in 138 countries around the world.
thank you.
We're blocking Iran and making the virus worse there because they can't get supplies that they need to help.
Ditto Venezuela.
Ditto Venezuela.
So maybe Angelo could read one or two of the poems from that book. I mean, that's 20 something years ago.
I would
Okay.
love to hear Chris read Henry Kissinger. You got that in your hand somewhere?
Oh,
That's Chris's poem, right?
Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
poem. I'd have to go and get it because I had planned to read a couple of other things.
Okay.
Why doesn't Angelo read something of his before, and I'll pull that up in the meantime.
Okay, give you a chance to do that. Angelo, you have something?
I'm going to read the poem that actually begins this book, which is mine. And it has a very has a title that I'm actually should be better than it is, but the title is Lopez Carrier of Mail. I worked in the post office for many years. In my dreams, Vietnam is a river of fire, trees burning, buffaloes burning, women burning, a fire so loud with eyes closed I can still hear it. I can hear it chewing the banks of the river. I did 19 months overseas, aged me 20 years. He pulls a plastic vial from inside his shirt to show me what he needs to sleep. Pain meds, Prozac, pot, booze, and these, he says into my eyes. They help, but not much. It changes you to kill people every day. Even if you don't kill them, it changes you to see people killed. But I did kill them. I killed buffaloes, I killed women, fish, birds. I killed anything that moved because I had to kill or be killed. You know what I mean? At night, you can't see 3 meters into the trees. Some Vietnamese moved into a building on my route. The first time I smelled fish heads cooking in the hallway, I saw the river blow up, blood gush, mud explode. I got sick. I got sick to my gut. I heaved black gunk I didn't know I still had in me. I saw myself running young again, the river in flames, dead in the mud, chewing their graves.
You know, one of the great things about doing this podcast and getting back in touch with you guys is getting to reread those poems, your poems.
Angelo,
It's so terrific.
Oh God, it's just.
And there are things that I've saw this time that I don't remember from before. Like there are 2 lines of Angelo's that just are indelible to me now. One of them is history flows in both directions. And the other one is the present changes the future and the future fashions the past it needs. That's what poetry can do.
Wow.
And just say it. And to show the compassion and the hardness at the same time. It's just a gorgeous poem as a poem and a gorgeous statement, I think. Yes.
I'm taken away by the visceral quality of it, the total embedding not my thought. I mean, my thought, yes, and I think thought comes later, but right now it's my kind of like it's in my gut. Those images. I mean, it's a smell and it's a look and it's a feel and it's a smell and yeah.
It's like what Veronica said. It gets underneath the rib.
It's underneath the rib.
I've read that poem and others to Afghan vets, and Afghanistan, you know, in terms of geography, is about as different a place from Vietnam as it could possibly be. And yet the emotion translates to, you know, across continents and geography, from jungle to desert, and from mud to snow. You know, the vets are a brotherhood that we've too little talked about on the left and in poetry, I think.
Have you met an audience member who was a vet who heard that poem, and did they comment on it? Or?
Yes, I've had people say, "Wow, you must have seen a lot of action." Now the truth is, I was never in the army, but I was. That's what Veronica meant by translating.
Right.
If you listen to someone's
listen.
If you actually listen, and most of us never do.
Right.
Yeah.
What we're going to say next. But if you actually listen, And if you have the instrument that can resonate to what you're hearing, then you can translate that into what people feel is genuine. What's true in a poem is the emotions. If the emotions are true, then the poem's true. The facts do not have to be literally true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also requires the listener of the poem to listen. I mean, you can't listen to a poem superficially.
I don't think you can not listen to that poem that
No.
Angelo
I mean,
just
certain
read.
poems just
So
grab you and
it's
like
the
they.
way Angelo reads it.
That's
Yeah.
true, yeah.
He, it's the one complaint I have all the time about poets not practicing and offering the audience a way to hear the poem. You saw how slowly he read it. The voice, his tone of it. I'm not pushing this on you. I'm
Yeah.
telling you.
Yeah.
And all of it is art. All of it is art, not falseness, but art. All of it, the way that he reads and presents it. And I really want to tell poets, please, practice at home. Somebody tells you 15 minutes, make it 13 minutes. I mean, really, because it's an offering. The poem is an offering, like the old gods, you're just offering it.
Wow.
Yeah. Plus, if you read it well, it helps not only the hearer, but you yourself to understand it.
Right?
Chris, you find your poem?
Yeah, I did. Since Veronica mentioned compassion, I have to tell you a little bit about this one. I had a very good friend who's died a year or so ago, Dave McReynolds, who was a lifelong socialist and head of the executive director of War Resisters League for about 40 years. I read him a poem once, and it was about somebody like Henry Kissinger. And he said, "But Chris, where's the compassion?" And that just struck me right to the heart. So then I wrote this poem, and I read it to him, and he liked it. And I said, "But Dave, there's not very much compassion in this poem." And he said, "That's all right. I hated this son of a bitch." So this is for Henry Kissinger. Is it too late to curse you, Henry? Is it time to have the years obscure your crimes? Time to close that chapter, let bygones be gone, give it a rest, let it be? No, it is not too late, Henry. And thus begins our curse. Be it never too late. Be the voices you hear in your dotage your victims' voices shouting assassin, thief, because you sat well-tailored in handsome offices and sent others out to prove your power. Because you wrote, with proper tactics, nuclear war need not be as destructive as it appears. Because you found white phosphorus a useful tool and napalm a tolerable arm of diplomacy and Agent Orange necessary to policy and tiger cages. Because you didn't understand why we should allow a country to go communist on account of its own people's ignorance. Because you enjoyed the company of Pinochet, Marcos, Duvalier, Stroessner, Somoza, the Shah. Because you regretted Laos and Cambodia. We should have found some other way of doing it. Because you killed Allende and shattered Neruda's heart as surely as if you had held the gun yourself. Because you accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. Because in the mirror you see a god, Hermes, Loki. Because you have a mind for deciding life and death, and it's pure injustice of history that you're not still doing it. May the insects refuse to touch you. May the worms spit you back. May you never know decay's comfort and rest. Let the voices follow you always. Let the burning children run toward you forever, clasping you in their flaming arms. Let your eternal waiting room be the stadium in Santiago, filled with silent prisoners filing past. Each one stops to look at you. And you, with all the time in the world, cannot look away. None mentions bruises, burns, missing fingernails, teeth, faces. Each only recites a name: Elena, Nugoyen, Christofis, Bobby Jean, Laureano. And one of them hands you a snapshot of his daughters, another his unused high school registration card, a third the unfinished history of her family. A fourth holds out a stuffed penguin won at a carnival moments before his arrest. The next carries nothing, having no hands, gives you only her look and whispers a poem, a hymn to the wind. The line of the disappeared goes on, and you will stand rooted, seeing them at last. And always, always will you hear the songs of love Victor Jara continues to sing, even without his tongue.
Now you know.
I miss you guys. These are my brothers. I just miss you enough about the whatever. This.
Yeah.
Now you know why I wouldn't consider reading that poem for Chris.
Yeah.
We get it.
It is his breath that gives it power.
Right. It's operatic. It's an operatic poem. And when he does his vibrato, it's just right.
Well, that vibrato is because I haven't got a choice. I'm about to cry there every time I read it.
I know.
Well, you can hear that. I mean, we have been blessed by Chris's readings a number of times.
I'm just going to get water. I'll be right back.
Okay, because actually it's Veronica's turn right now.
Next, the lines of the disappeared go on and on.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
And the poet and singer that you mentioned, Victor Jara, we had talked about with Martine Espada and Lauren Schmidt, right? He had done a poem that involved Jara. Yeah, I'm a sinful person because in my early days I was a waiter and I served Henry Kissinger and his wife in an expensive restaurant. Yeah. And
well, you got to make a living somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that counts as a sin.
I mean, I still remember. I mean, he was sitting there, as deathly as day.
Oh God, I don't think the man will ever die. He's a vampire.
He's still around.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's still alive. He's 97 years old.
Wow.
Veronica, you have something for us.
Yeah, I'm going to read from my book. This is the book I read from, Vocabulary of Silence. My second book, Pieta. What of the farm mother, her soldier son, shattered? She hides her shuddering inside the closet, rubs the coat and boots he'll never need again, his body of cut-off stems. Before, in his child life sleep, his legs flung open. Sometimes she couldn't even look. He was so beautiful, although she didn't have then and doesn't have now the word. She's speared through. That smell in his room, his blind left eye, 3 limbs sawed away, his shit staining the white sheets, the Walmart sheets she buys and buys. You see, he had been so crisp, so cut line, so formal in the uniform, as if he had been pressed somehow inside, and her, with her deep knowledge of ironing, of pressing herself, had recognized it in him, and saw beauty in it. Yes, in the sharp crease, it was clean and clear, that work of hands, and the message that worked carried, that someone had done this for him. She rolls him on his side and removes 4 times daily the sheets from the bed, daily brushes her fingers against his white t-shirt lightly. Its short arms flap. There is nothing to hold. Finding muscle there in his still strong back and the back of his head, that little scar from the day he fell off the tractor when she thought, yes, I could kill his father, yes, for this. Oh, her memory is a sharpened thing. Where are his arms and his leg? She wants to lift him. She wants to smother him. She wants to finger all the edges of his wounds. She wants him back. She wants him to die. All her words, the ones she could say on some spring day. The sun's out. The rye is up. Stuck somewhere below the solar plexus of her, those beauty words. Sun, grass, rain, horse, earth, gone. Only he remains.
Wow, Veronica. God, I miss you. Why the hell are you not still in New York?
Please.
Why am I not in New Mexico?
Not right now. I wouldn't be there. You know, I was supposed to go. I was supposed to see you all anyway.
You were supposed to come and visit my class.
Yeah.
Veronica, I don't have a collection of your stuff. It's what I could find online and what Chris was sharing with me. But I read Pieta yesterday. I was bawling, and I'm bawling now. Our son was in the military. I mean, he's okay. But the crisp lines of that Marine suit that he had, I just put myself... And I was hoping you read it. I was hoping you wouldn't read it because I know my wife was going to be in tears from it. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm disgusted. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. But when will it?
Can I just say that, you know, even taking these 3 poems that we've read, it's why we worked so well together, because while the aim is similar, our voices come from different angles, have different tones, you know, from opera to this kind of irony, or just the walking of this postal worker, and then this mother, So I just feel again, I'm what Chris is saying, that I just so miss this, writers. I mean, there's all beautiful writers here, and I love everybody and all that, but these 2 are just bring me to myself in a way that a lot of other poets don't.
We're going to get back together. And that's one thing that's just become crystal clear to me right now.
Good. I'm glad we did the podcast.
That's great.
Then.
There you go. It served a purpose.
In that little statement of principle or purpose that began the 3 Poets for Peace Against the Tide of War, she said that what gets smudged around. Smudged. That's a New York word. Smudged. It gets smudged. It
is now.
I think it is. Yeah.
Largely erased the commonality of being human, and that the mother's grief is, you can't not get that. Particularly if you're a parent, of course. But you can't not get that if you have a heart that beats.
Are you talking about Henry Kissinger now?
Well, some people don't have hearts, though. It's true.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
some people don't have hearts. Yes, that is the point. Some people, and they can't be helped by poetry, but the vast majority of people do and can.
Yeah.
Maybe you should send your poem to Henry Kissinger, Chris. Have you ever thought of that? Just send it to him.
Well,
Dear
it's
Henry,
online, and
dear Henry
I've always
Kissinger.
hoped that he'd see it someday.
Yeah. Well, he's a big listener of barcrawlradio. So,
Yeah, right. There you go.
You know, we
There
had.
was a time when he was the Upper West Side's most eligible bachelor, wasn't
Oh
he?
boy.
Really?
Yeah.
Listen, we put aside an hour for this, and we're only halfway through what I had scripted out, and I think we need to get together again, maybe for the second
Part two
of our discussion of the gendered voice of poetry, and maybe
Wow, you want to do that
I
next
would
week?
love that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
that'd be great.
let's
You don't
plan
want to
it.
do it now, but you.
No,
wanna get it.
I'm full.
We can't switch gears right now.
I
No.
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also want to ask, and I don't know whether we could do it now or later, is this idea, and maybe we could do it later, but maybe give some thought to this, is like we're in the middle of this this coronavirus epidemic, pandemic, and it seems to me that it's an opportunity.
For a poet's voice?
It's for a poet's voice, but an opportunity for us to
Interpretation.
to see ourselves in a way we've never been like this. The whole world has never been like this. My biggest fear right now is that we won't take advantage of it, and that we'll just
but
go right
you know-
back to where we were.
You know, Alan, one of the things about this is I tried writing a poem about coronavirus and the lockdown.
Yeah,
It didn't work. It takes a while for poetry to
percolate.
and bubble up.
That's what Martine said. He said, you can't write it now.
Yeah, I mean, Angela's got a book-length poem about 9/11. Didn't publish it until 2008, I think, 2007, 2008, 6 years later.
Yeah,
And I'm still working on mine. And poetry doesn't come, when you call it.
I do want to say I have been writing some poems, and I would say out of 30 of them, maybe 2 or. But I think it's more about who are we? Like, what kind of species are we?
Oh, God.
I mean, because I'm hearing these brothers of mine read their work in conjunction with my own, and I just want to say, that's what it led, that period with them during that time led me to all the rest of the books, and also this query about who we are. Why are we the way we are? I just, so that it's not, for me, the writing of some of these poems were more about like, here, who am I? Am I a we? Am I, just the more, I don't know.
yeah. So maybe I should
need
not.
like 15 different sections to really have a great conversation.
I think that the virus and the quarantine will show up in poetry. I have a little thing where I record dreams and work on them as if they're source material for poems. And the virus has begun to show up in some of the dreams. I had a dream the other day in which people were being selfish, and the way they were being selfish were they weren't wearing masks in the subway.
That's not a dream.
That's a reality.
That's reality.
The tropes begin to seep into your head and show up in the poems. It's not like you decide, it's time to write a poem about the coronavirus. I mean, that's not how poetry works.
Yeah, that's what I'm learning from talking to poets, that this is not how it works.
Right.
Becky and Alan, thank you very much for the really good questions, the listening, the commentary, and for doing this. It's work, and we really appreciate it. Love you both. Oh,
Love you,
so
babe.
good to see you. All right, I'm leaving. Says
Bye-bye.
leave on the right hand.
If Veronica's leaving, my heart is broken. I'm leaving too.
This is Bar Crawl Radio, and we have been talking with 3 poets for peace. We want to thank Angelo Verga and Veronica Golos for joining us today, and of course, Chris Brandt, who helps produce these series of episodes. Poetry, what is it good for? Alan and I are grateful for your words, for the words of all poets who search for the hidden truth that drives us towards better lives.
This has been the 5th in the BCR series Poetry, What Is It Good For?, co-produced by Chris Brandt. If you've been enjoying our podcast, let us know by emailing us at barcrawlradio@gmail.com.